Hello, my name is Sang Youm, and I am an associate professor at Department of Architecture and Architectural Engineering at Yonsei University in Seoul, Korea. I run a design research lab called CAT Architecture and Urban Design Lab. We focus a lot in architecture and also in urban research and design. We do research regarding the relationship between architecture and urban. And we also do actual projects, renovation projects, small projects, or also a lot of exhibitions as well. And we also focus on using recent technologies and how we could use that in architectural design or also in architectural educations. In that sense, what I would like to present today is called the role of immersive VR as a design tool in an architectural design studio. Architects use various types of presentational methods and tools in a design process, such as sketches, drawings, and physical or digital models are many tools that are used to understand and to present the architect's work. Likewise, these tools are used and taught in many architectural schools. Primarily, three-dimensional physical and digital models are used to understand the spatial quality of architecture. Recently, with the increased accessibility of VR, the virtual reality systems, many studies and experiments of using this immersive VR environment in architectural educations have been increased. Especially, there are many researches regarding the usability of VR in architectural design education, the use of VR in early stage design, and a lot of researches regarding using VR in understanding or teaching historical buildings, and many researches comparing between traditional 2D and 3D methods. A lot of these researches are using separate tasks or exercises to evaluate the potential or the possibility of VR. But what I like to do with this research is to understand the potential and usability of immersive VR that can be applied directly to our current conventional architectural design studios. So what I wanted to do with this research is to find what the VR can do, what are the aspects of VR that can be used in our current conventional architectural design studio. So what I've done is when I was teaching the architectural design studio at our school at Yonsei University, during the 15-week course, I've used 1 week as to use the VR assignment and to be used to supplement our conventional architectural design studio. It was conducted on 2021 spring semester. It was a studio targeted for second-year undergrad students, which in our school are the first semester for the students to actually do a design studio work. It was a project for a single-family house. The overall studio was a 15-week with 2 classes per week. But for the VR design assignment, I allocated 1 week, which is 2 classes for the VR assignment. And the number of students were 11 students. Now, during the 15-week course, we had a mid-review at week 8, and for this VR assignment, I placed it on the latter half of the studio, which meant that the students' design concept or the design direction were pretty much fixed right after mid-review, and for the use of VR were used when they were finalizing or refining their design work. So this was how the VR design assignments were given to the students. They were asked to use the VR headset and the VR environment to experience their own architectural design and to make modifications on design issues that were found during the VR environment, and conduct this task twice. And lastly, document and record all the design issues and modifications that they made and submit to us. There were no input or direction from the instructor. This was because the purpose of the research was to find how the students intuitively utilizes and uses the VR environment. The tools that were used in the studio and for the VR environment were Rhinoceros 3D, Enscape, and the Samsung VR headset. Rhinoceros 3D is a 3D modeling tool that is very common in our school and which is used very for most of the students use this program. And the Enscape is a plugin. Is a real-time plugin, rendering plugin that is plugged to Rhinoceros 3D. So it produces a rendering, which is a real-time rendering, and it is directly connected to the VR headset. So whatever you do in the Rhinoceros 3D modeling environment, it is directly connected to Enscape and to Samsung headset, so you are looking at the rendered 3D VR environment real time from the Rhinoceros 3D. This is a screenshot of Rhinoceros and Enscape plugin. The screen you see on the left is the Rhinoceros 3D environment, and on the right is the Enscape rendering view, which this kind of view is shown real time, and you could also change the sun direction, which would change the shadows as well. What was most important was that when you change the walls or the tables locations, whatever you do on the left in Rhinoceros will be applied directly without any waiting time on Enscape, which will be directly connected to the VR headset. So this Enscape was a connection between Rhinoceros 3D and the VR headset. So each student would put on their headset and look at their environment. And since they are in the environment, and since that they can not really modify the Rhinoceros model, we had an assistant do that for you. So the student with the headset would instruct the assistant to make changes, do this or that, and talk to them, and the assistant will make the modifications, and the student will know that in real time and kind of communicate with the assistant and make modifications with their design. And at the end, they submitted something that looked like this, which were first the design modifications that they made. Second was their comment on their overall experience, what they felt during this exercise. And third was the documentations and records that the assistant made, and we asked them to send this to us also. And the fourth was the actual digital Rhinoceros 3D file, so that we could use it later on. We collected all this data and organized it and analyzed it. We looked in deeply to see what were the things that the student were considering mostly while using VR? What was different when they were using VR compared to physical models or any other conventional design tools that they've been using? So the chart that we looked into, we separated the design issues and the overall experiences and looked in these two categories deeply to see what they were especially considering. So for the design issues, these were the things that they mostly looked at: the dimensions, openings, spatial relationship, vertical circulation, atmosphere, sunlight and shadow, and geometries. And when you look at them, um, these top three, the dimension, opening, and spatial relationship, came out 9 out of 11 students. So most of the students looked at these design issues. The dimensions, meaning that they were looking at their design, and they in their VR environment, they would say, oh, this looked smaller than they thought. Oh, the ceiling height should be higher, or the hallway needs to be narrow or larger, that it was different from what they've anticipated. The opening was another interesting thing, that most of the students, the 9 out of 11 students, were making changes on the openings. The openings meaning the windows and doors or any other openings, that they would modify the location of the windows or change the sizes of the windows, or put more or make design modifications with the openings in the facade, looking from the inside, not looking from the outside, but mostly looking from inside the room or the spaces that they've designed. And thirdly, they looked at the spatial relationship with the adjacent spaces. So they would consider more about what this room that they're looking at, they're immersive in, and compare that with the other room and see the relationship between that two or more spaces, and make modifications within the VR environment. And the others, those three were the main design issues that the students were looking at, and the others, the vertical circulation, atmosphere, sunlight and shadow, and geometry, also came up with a couple students as well. For when you look at the overall experiences, it was pretty much everybody commented on the same experience, saying that it really helped them to really understand the spatial quality. They had more sense of space, of the space that they've designed. And for a beginning student, beginning architecture students, they had a hard time understanding the spatial quality of their space they've designed before using traditional methods. But when they actually got into the VR environment and looked at their space in a one-to-one scale, they got a more sense of space. So that's why they were talking a lot about the dimensions of the spaces, and maybe and the height differences, or the stairs and vertical circulation, that it felt different from what they've anticipated before. And it was interesting to see that most of them they would say, using the traditional 3D modeling tool or physical modeling methods, they focused more on the exterior forms, how their building will be shaped like. But when they were using VR environments, they were looking more into the interior spaces, how the space actually felt, how the interior space quality is. So that was an interesting difference that we've found during this experiment. This is one of the cases of one student out of the 11 students, which was quite interesting for me. As we've seen before, this student also looked at the dimensions and the openings of his design while looking at in the VR environment. But this student also looked quite a lot in the atmospheres, of his design, like you see here, that this was he wanted to have a house which had multiple layers, and he wanted to he had couple courtyards or open spaces that he has certain quality of space that he wanted to make, and it was a bit hard to do with traditional methods. But when he went into this using this VR environment, he went into all these different rooms, all the rooms, and made very little minor changes, like as you see here in dimensions. He was lowering the fence a little bit, about 1.5 meters, or lowered the terrace fence 1 meter. So he was making very little changes, which was not a lot about the mass or the concept, but it was more about how the space felt and if it met his need or his purpose. So this was the one on the left was before the VR exercise. On the right was after the VR exercise, which seemed pretty much the same. But when you look at it, he made these changes within, after, or during the VR exercise, which made quite a bit of change of the spatial quality of his final design. So at the end, this was his work and his presentation, which showed the quality of space, the proportion of the space, the flow of space, or the relations of space that he wanted, which was only, I shouldn't say only, but which was pretty much helpful because he used the VR environment instead of looking at a 1:20 scale, 1:50 scale model, but as an actual 1:1 scale model. So to conclude this presentation, the design issues mainly considered by the students using the VR environment were dimension of interior spaces, the relationship between adjacent spaces, their focus on openings on walls, and the sense of space. These findings gave us a great input to understand the role of immersive VR in a design studio, that the VR environment is not a substitute, but it is a new complementary tool that could be used to convey spatial sense to beginning architecture students, which were a bit difficult to do using the traditional or conventional teaching methods. The VR environment could be more suitable in our current digitally oriented studio environment. For this research, there were no interaction or instruction from the instructor, but in the future it will be interesting to see how the instructor and the student interact within the 1:1 scale VR environment. The instructors are trained architects to understand the space using scaled model or drawings, but the students are not. So this VR environment could be a middle step between the students and the instructor, and it will be interesting to see how this VR environment, this 1:1 scale, could be used as a design studio tool between the instructor and the student. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope this would this could become a great starting point and a research for understanding the VR in a design studio. Thank you very much.